chassis has now been lowered into what I call a starting point. I've got it about a foot off the ground. Gives me enough room to get the cherry picker underneath of it and not be so high up that I'm on my tiptoes trying to pick this motor up and get the bolt situated. If you are working on something other than a polished concrete floor, finding a piece of steel or aluminum, like in a sheet, old stop sign, some of those drip pans that you can buy from like O'Reilly's or whatever. I found that to be fairly useful when I was working on either asphalt or rough concrete. I'd set the motor on that and then be able to slide it a little bit with it sitting on the ground. And that'll save you a little bit of height versus having it on like a four-wheel dolly or something like that. You'll also see that we've taken the core support brace out, and that the only other thing I'm waiting to do is I'm going to drape over this motor just to protect it as I pick it up with the chains and whatnot. You want to check and make sure that your spacing in here in this bushing is going to be enough room to fit that in there without any problems. I usually put a little bit of assembly lube or grease on there just to help those poly bushings slide through. They get a little sticky. I've also seen some that are overly compressed from either a too small amount or just getting beat up for their last 40 years of life. So double check those before you start getting a motor halfway up in the air and trying to figure out why it's stuck. That's an easy thing to do to save you a little bit of time. One last thing, unless you're installing a 12 valve with a removable aluminum manifold, I recommend having your radiator in place beforehand. You'll have a really hard time with any plastic intaked Vr6 and getting a radiator in there, especially with a shroud. It will be frustrating for sure. So this is how I normally set up to install it. I just set it in there. It's not bolted down yet at all. It's just sitting in there so that I don't have to fight with it later. All right, so our motor's in. I just loosely started those two motor mount bolts so that I can position motor side to side just a little bit if I need to. I'm going to pull this lift out of here, and then we will go underneath the car and start with that rear differential mount. Okay, here's what you should have received with your rear diff mount. Bolt and a large washer, a bushing, two rubber inserts, and then these two mounts. I've already put the bushing into this mount so that when this goes in here, it rides against the bushing. Bolt is then going to go through here and tighten down. So we will now go underneath the car and actually install it in place. We're going to take these three bolts out, and that's where our new mount is going to sit, and we will reuse this hardware in the transmission. Okay, our bolts are out. We're going to start with this bolt just in this bracket to help us fit this a little easier. And it is really tight on that frame rail there. So you're going to slide this back and into that bracket. Get rid of a little bit of that bolt. Once that kind of just drops in there a little bit, now we can position our bolt a little better. All right. So now your bolts are ready to head in. Just get them started. And then get your rear securing bolt back here. Get it started. Now you're ready to tighten down your diff mount and get everything secure. Make sure that your motor is kind of centered where you want it. There's not much you're going to do left to right. This is what's positioning the motor where I want it in the bay. Before you tighten everything down, it's always good to look everything over and make sure you're where you want to be. If you ordered a 3-mount kit, this is the end of your install. You're ready to tighten everything down and move on to whatever your next step is. The 4th mount I'm going to cover here in a minute, but if you've ordered a 3-mount kit, you are now done. Okay, installing this 4th mount. I've got this bumper or this core support brace just loosely up in here. And even if you were installing it permanently to your bumper, I would recommend leaving it a little loose until you got this bracket in here. It gives you just a little bit of wiggle room. Anyway, this thing just slides in and sits right there. And you use your OEM hardware like we talked about before. This might be the wrong bolt. Now you'll install your upper starter bolt, then install your core support bolts to hold the OEM bracket to the core support brace. Before you tighten these 2 bolts down permanently, go ahead and get your bumper bolt secure. That way you're, you're sitting square against the frame rails. There's nowhere for it to torque or twist. Other than that, tighten everything down. If you are installing the 4th mount, once you have this secured where you want, go and secure the rear, the 3rd mount down permanently and tighten everything down, and you've now completed the install of your 4-mount Vr6 kit.